Eric Staal, the overtime hero, Brendan Gallagher's fractured thumb, and of course, Carey Price and his injury woes. All this and more on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie, and joining me today, the usual suspects, Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Rusnak, and former Montreal Canadiens defenseman and assistant coach Rick Green. Let's jump right into these questions, everybody. If you were to tell me at the beginning of this season we would see the Montreal Canadiens win a game in overtime thanks to Eric Staal, I would tell you to shut up, turn off your Xbox, and stay 6 feet away from me. But we live in a reality where Eric Staal plays for the Montreal Canadiens and he scored an overtime winning goal, and that might have been the moment of the season for the Montreal Canadiens. Kind of reminiscent of when Ilya Kovalchuk scored in overtime last year. Remember, Ilya Kovalchuk was on this team. Anyway, Eric Staal, what were your takeaways from his performance earlier this week, and how do you think he'll help this team going forward?
Well, look, they probably should have brought him in earlier to improve on their overtime record because did what he was supposed to do, and is obviously really huge. But looking at his overall game, he's a big guy that has great experience. I mean, he played almost 17 minutes. His faceoffs were outstanding, 14 out of 18. That's what they were looking for when they brought this guy in. So, look, he's just going to do nothing but complement their group. And obviously, to see the way that game finished, he was ecstatic about being part of it and to leave that kind of impression, in his first game in the Montreal Canadiens uniform. Very, very happy for him, and obviously the team was.
I think Marc Bergevin has a fountain of youth somewhere. I think he uses it himself for his biceps. And then he said, you look at last season.
Good with the biceps.
How these old guys he brings in here, they seem to do well. Corey Perry, you mentioned Kovalchuk last year, and now Eric Staal. I was really happy for Eric Staal because you look what he's gone through this season. He left his family behind in Minnesota when he went to Sabres training camp just after Christmas. He hasn't seen them since. He's got 3 boys. Having to play for that Buffalo team. I mean, what a horrible hockey team. Getting traded and then having to spend 7 days in quarantine before playing the first game. So I was just really happy for him. And I think it was a really good pickup by Marc Bergevin, another veteran leader on this team. His legs might be slower, but his hands aren't, and his brain isn't, similar to Corey Perry. So he's a player, they can use him on any line. They can move him up and down. I think one of the keys for him is putting on the same power play unit as Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki has been so bad on faceoffs this season. That really hurts him on the power play. So now you got another guy in there on the power play who can win key faceoffs, keep the puck in the offensive zone. I think it's good all around. And again, I was really happy to see him score that goal. He seems like a character guy. He seems like a good guy just from judging what everybody said about him and listening to him on his Zoom interviews. So another good move by Marc Bergevin. Picking up someone and giving up really nothing. He gave up a 3rd and a 5th round pick. He already has 2 other picks in those rounds. So it was a good night. And it's too bad. It was another one of those nights. It's just too bad there were no fans at the Bell Center because they would have blown the roof off the place.
Yeah, definitely. It was those moments that you're like, oh, COVID took this away from us because the Bell Center would have been just crazy after that goal. But Eric Staal said that he had no idea that the Habs had yet to win in overtime. And he only found out afterwards when Victor Mete told him. So maybe that was a good thing, that his teammates were going into it saying, oh no, if we lose again, we know the headlines are going to be another overtime loss. But Eric Staal didn't know, got the goal and put an end to it. But I think it's also a change of scenery that has helped him out a lot. Things were not good in Buffalo, comes to a new team, has a little bit of rest from that 7 days of quarantine, and then probably added a little bit of a jump to him too, because he was looking forward to doing something and being able to get back to playing. So all in all, it's been really good so far for Eric Staal, and I don't necessarily see there being a huge drop off by him. Yes, he's older, but he's still, one of elite players in the league. And as we said, mentally, he's sharp. So he knows how to adjust to the game and adjust to the game as a 36-year-old.
And everything that happened to him in Buffalo, just throw it in the garbage. I mean, including his minus 20. Last season in Minnesota, you had, I believe it was 47 points, which would have ranked him 2nd on the Canadiens in scoring. So, he's still got it. Like he said, I'm not the same player I was when I was 20 or 23. But he said, I think I can still get around the ice okay and get to the spots I need to be. And I think he can.
And it's always nice when the new player comes into the team and, you know, the coach shows confidence right off the get-go and using him in a lot of situations, giving him plenty of ice time to show what he can do. So I think that's a real boost for anybody that's been traded to know that you obviously got your coach on your side. He's going to give you every opportunity to succeed. And like I said, with a seasoned pro like him, he knows what it takes, and he has the intelligence to play within, looking at what he's done on his first game. He understands how to play within his limitations and be effective. And obviously a great addition from his first game. And hopefully that will continue, because I think, judging by what we're hearing, and like Stu said, he's a good guy and he deserves everything that he's going to get on the success side.
I thought it was interesting too when he showed up Sunday to skate by himself while the rest of the team had the day off, and Ben Sherratt and Joel Edmondson showed up at the practice rink to greet him, sort of make him feel welcome. That says a lot about those two players, and it says a lot about Eric Staal also.
And I think also there are still some players out there around that say, wow, I can be part of the Montreal Canadiens history. That's huge, and I think this is the type of guy that you have in Staal, and it's a win-win for the Canadiens.
And he went 14-4 on faceoffs his debut. That's remarkable.
Yeah,
can't get any better than that. I'll add two things on Eric Staal before we move on to the next question. That overtime goal he scored earlier this week, pretty much a carbon copy of the goal he scored in Game 7, I want to say in 2008 or 2009 in the first round of the Carolina Hurricanes when they came back from 2-1 against New Jersey Devils. Also, I wonder how many Montreal Canadiens fans, after seeing that OT goal, have immediately forgotten the 2006 OT goal he scored as a member of the Canes in Game 3 of that first round series. What a series that was. That it turned around so many things for the Canes. They went on to win the Stanley Cup, obviously, and man, anyway, I'm not going to drudge up any old memories. Let me move on to question number 2.
Jonathan Drouin remembers it. Jonathan Drouin was 11 years old at the time, and he spoke about how he remembered watching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I was behind the bench going, oh no.
Oh, no. Oh, I should. You know what? I forgot about that. Yes, Rick, you were there for that. I should.
Yeah.
You know what? I should have drudged old memories from that.
Yeah, I saw it firsthand, and we weren't very happy about that.
All right, let's move on to question number 2. A lot of smiles after that overtime winner, obviously, earlier this week. But Brendan Gallagher leaving the game in some pain and discomfort, obviously, after taking a shot on the hand from Alexander Romanov. He is out with a fractured thumb week to week. How much pain are the Montreal Canadiens going to feel without Brendan Gallagher in the lineup? And is the answer to have Jesperi Kotkaniemi, we know him as a center, but he's playing on the wing, play in his place?
Yeah, I think this is going to hurt the Montreal Canadiens because Brendan Gallagher is that spark plug that if things are not going well, the way he plays is able to, be contagious to his teammates in a good way and spark something from them. So you always see a difference when Brendan Gallagher is not in the lineup. And how unlucky can he be? Twice with Shea Weber, now the other hand with Romanov. But you know what? I'm interested to see what Jesperi Kotkaniemi is going to be able to do on the wing. He said in Finland, he does have experience playing in that position. Ideally, it would be better to keep him at center. But I want to see, exactly what he's able to do and what he's able to bring on that line. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I like seeing Kotkaniemi there because it's going to get him more ice time. That line gets a lot of ice time. It's going to get him more ice time. It's also going to relieve some of the defensive responsibilities. He's going to have less playing on the wing than he does on center. And it might get him to use that shot more often. He's got that great shot. So I think it's good all around. I mean, I think Dominic Ducharme will probably, if Kotkaniemi doesn't work out, I think he's going to probably move different people in and out of that spot to see who fits best. But Brendan Gallagher, I mean, he's the heart and soul of this team. You can't just replace everything he does, never mind the goals that he scores, but just the drive he has and the will he has. But how unlucky can a guy be? I mean, how often do you hear about a guy breaking his hand, getting hit with a shot? Not that often. 3 times it's happened to this guy now. So I really feel for Brendan Gallagher, but I think this is an opportunity for Jesperi Kotkaniemi to play with 2 really good players, get more ice time. It would be a little bit uncomfortable, I'm sure, at first getting adjusted to the right wing position. As Jess mentioned, he had played it before in Finland. But I think it's a smart move by Dominic Ducharme.
Yeah, it is a shame you lose Gallagher like that. But I know we touched on it earlier about hoping that the team can stay healthy and not lose some of their key guys. We've seen previously when Gallagher does go down, and being the type of player he is and the catalyst for initiating the kind of play that the Canadiens want to do, it's tough to replace a guy like that. And he's tied for second in scoring. It's a real difficult thing, but I think that they're fortunate from a standpoint. They have enough depth, I think, up front that they can move Kotkaniemi over there and see what he can do. It's not carved in stone. Give him the opportunity and see what he does. They've got enough skill. They've got enough guys around that they can fill this void. And there's every team is going to deal with it, and they're just one unfortunate group that have a couple of guys that go down through injury. So when one goes down, the door opens up for somebody else to shine, and this is a perfect opportunity to see and test the character of each and every one of those guys to step in and fill the shoes and bring up the slack that has been given through injury. So hopefully things will pan out. But there's, like I said, there's trial and error, and you see where it goes, and you can always go from there. And I'm sure Dominic Ducharme has a plan B if his plan A doesn't work.
And in previous seasons, if Brendan Gallagher and Carey Price both got hurt, the season's over. Like, turn off the lights, the party's over. That's not the case this season. I mean, it's going to hurt them, but this team has never had more depth and when it comes to scoring. So, like, losing Brendan Gallagher is a big blow, but it's not a lethal blow like it would have been in previous seasons.
I'm just curious, though. Stu and Jess, you probably know better than me, but in reading some of the quotes from Kotkaniemi about this, I get the sense that he was kind of excited about playing on the right wing, and he seemed very much open to it. Am I wrong here in that assessment? What did you guys think?
Well, I think it's his character, like, this is the situation that he's in. I don't necessarily think he's going to come out and sort of pout about it and say, you know what, I'm a centerman, I don't want to have to play on the wing. But he's playing on a line with two good players. So I think if he was the fourth line winger, maybe he would feel a little bit not as happy. But I think he realizes that this is a really great opportunity for him. And why not? And this is what happens when players get injured. You got to juggle the lineup.
It also it allows Jake Evans to get back in the lineup also, right? When he's a good penalty killer, he's played well. He hasn't produced a lot of offense, but he's done a solid job as a fourth line center. So I think it works in many different ways having this move.
And hopefully Kotkaniemi is not intimidated by being put up there and feel that as a young kid being with those older guys that he has to look to find those guys with passes all the time instead of executing his shots. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles himself. And I think listen, he's given the opportunity, he has enough skill and intelligence that he can adapt, and we'll see where it goes.
It was a good answer he had when he was talking about going into the game against Toronto Wednesday night, and they said, how do you think it goes? Well, I'll tell you after the game. To see how things work out.
Let's talk about Carey Price. Move on to question number 3. We know we've talked about him a lot this year. We know about the ups and downs he's gone through. In the latest development, he tweaks. He gets a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of an injury in the victory over the Edmonton Oilers. Unavailable against the Toronto Maple Leafs Wednesday night. I'm just curious here. With Carey Price, with the lower body injury that he has, should fans be concerned about it this time around again? And I know someone is going to bring up the contract, so let's bring out the contract here. Do you think Marc Bergevin regrets signing Carey Price to that deal, $84 million?
For me, the first and most important part of all of this is, Stefan Wade saying that, geez, maybe he was really angry with the scenario, but he says Carey Price will never get to be 100%. And in saying that, that's kind of scary when you know that he has that much time left on his contract if you want to bring dollars and cents into it. But really, the bottom line is, at 33 years old, is this guy got any real upside to get his best game out there each and every night? Or is he injured and there's other things that have been hanging on that are not going to get better as he gets older? And that's got to be a real tough discussion that goes on with management when they go, oh boy, are we in trouble, or are we going to find a way for this guy to make things happen or not? And it's it's not a great situation right now.
I think Bergevin did regret giving him that contract when he blew a gasket and fired Stefan Waite in the middle of a game. I think that was, but Stefan Waite, he did a lengthy interview afterwards with TSN Radio with Mitch Melnick, and I don't think he was bitter. I think he was being honest. And he said, Carey Price has knee issues, hip issues, all kinds of back issues, and you can play him maybe 2 or 3 games in a row, but not more than that. And he said that's why Marc Bergevin went out and got Jake Allen, because they know they need to have a solid backup goalie, because you can't rely on Price being healthy all the time. And I think this is just another sign that this is going to be the story with Carey Price moving forward. The thing with him, the other thing that Stefan Waite said that was interesting, comparing him to Marc-Andre Fleury, who's 3 years older, but Fleury's like a Gumby, right? Like he bends in all these different weird positions, like so many goalies are. Most of these goalies are like gymnasts almost, with the flexibility they have. Carey Price is built like a tight end. It amazes me when you see him walk around the locker room, you see how big he is, that he is that flexible. It's incredible to me that a big guy that muscular can be as flexible as he is. But it's a lot of weight hitting the ice every time he drops down on his knees. It's a lot of wear and tear on the body, and that's what's happened. Carey Price is breaking down, whether people want to admit it or not. His body is breaking down, and the Canadiens moving forward they can't. As much as Carey Price wants to play every game, he simply can't. I think moving forward, they really do have to split it almost 50-50 between him and Jake Allen.
And it was a risky contract to give that much money to a goaltender. And when Carey Price signed this contract, he had these injuries beforehand. So it's not like they all emerged after the signing and you can say, well, hindsight's 2020. Marc Bergevin should have known at that point that he's had some issues that haven't 100% gone away and that they could come back again. And we're in a situation like this. Now he's listed as day-to-day. It's not like he's out for the season or anything like that. But you have to be a little bit concerned about having that much money on a goaltender whose health is starting to have a lot of question marks around it. And as you said, he's a goaltender that likes to play a lot, but for the betterment of the team, he needs to share the net with Jake Allen. And I think that Marc Bergevin does have some blame on here because he had no backup goalie for years and years, and they had to rely on Carey Price and putting him out there. And maybe that did more damage to his body, and we're seeing that now. But it's not the best contract to have for a goaltender in Carey Price's position.
Well, moving forward, that contract and Shea Weber's contract both have 5 years left. Marc Bergevin has said in the past he doesn't believe in windows of opportunity to win, but I think the moves he's been making this season contradict that. I think he realizes that Carey Price and Shea Weber, you better win with them now, because 3 years down the road, these are going to be 2 contracts that are going to weigh very heavily on the Canadiens.
And it's also, it's great for him to say, yeah, I want to play every game to stay sharp, blah, blah, blah. But look at the schedule. I mean, let's face it. It's really, really tough. And, in that position, and again, I'll throw his age into the scenario. It's not easy for him. And I'm sorry, but sometimes you're going to have to take second spot when it comes down to going with the hot hand, so to speak. And, this is something obviously that they've talked about. And I guess you have to massage sometimes some egos here to make the right decision. But, the bottom line at the end of the day is you got to get a guy that's healthy, is able to play up to his potential, or you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And, it's unfortunate, but we've seen it before with Carey Price when he logs a lot of minutes, games, and we're seeing it firsthand with this grind. It's tough for him to hold up, and next thing you know, injury bug grabs a hold.
Well, Price's health is a big reason not only why Marc Bergevin went and got Jake Allen, but also why he signed him to a two-year contract extension after he got him, giving a little bit more of a buffer zone while Caden Primo, the so-called goalie of the future, continues to mature.
And I think
Primo's looked okay too.
And the past has shown that arrested Carey Price is a better Carey Price. And, I don't think they've utilized the fact that they have a good backup in Allen and let him tow a little bit of the weight and get Carey back to being real rested and fresh, both mentally and physically. But goalies are a special category. So
I think Carey himself needs to accept the fact he can't play every game. He wants to. I mean, we saw how he didn't play well earlier in the season when they were rotating him and Jake Allen, and then Dominic Ducharme came in and played Carey for a long stretch of games, and now we're seeing the toll that's taken on his body. So I think Carey Price has to look in the mirror and just realize that he can't play every game anymore. He physically can't.
And the player is the first one to know that you're not playing up to your ability, and you're going to have to just kind of take a step back and let somebody else toll a little bit of the load, because it's too tough a grind to have not everybody at their best.
I'll just end with this here. The Montreal Canadiens and other teams in the NHL have shown you don't need to invest $10 million in a goalie anymore. I know Andrei Vasilevsky, once his deal kicks in, if it hasn't already, he's going to be making a lot of money, but he's still not going to be making nearly as much money as Carey Price. At the end of the day, you still need all that money poured out in your forwards and your defense, and you can live with a goalie who's making just like $5 million a year, for example, and not have to shell out so much money here. So I think to answer this question here, you could go in on the fact that Marc Bergevin should have gotten himself a decent backup for Carey Price a long time ago. But the fact that teams are trending in a direction where they don't have to shell out double digits for a goaltender, that's already enough to have buyer's remorse. And I'm someone who's defended Carey Price vehemently, saying that when he is on his game, he's the best goaltender in the world. But at that price tag and the injury history that he has, it's a bit much.
I'll defend Marc Bergevin a bit here because his hands were a little bit tight. Either you sign him to that contract or you trade him, because he was going to get that kind of money from some other team, if not the Canadiens. Marc Bergevin didn't want to lose Carey Price, obviously. He didn't want to trade him. You have to wonder what he might have got in the trade market back then if he had moved him. But at the time, Marc Bergevin hitched his cart to Carey Price, still believing he's the number one goalie in the world, paid him the money. So in defense of Marc Bergevin, you either give him that contract or you trade him. Those were the two options, and he chose to keep him. And
at that particular time, it's all timing, because that's the money that was fair at the time. It's like Norris Trophy winners. You win a Norris Trophy, you're up for a contract, and guess what? You double up your salary for a long-term contract. And his hands were basically tied on that front, and he did what he thought was right. And unfortunately, it's not the best scenario as we look at the track record to date.
And defending Marc Bergevin again, I've been very critical of him in the past. If you look at every team and look at capfriendly.com and look at the contracts, almost every team has a bad contract there. It's part of being a GM. Players are given this kind of length and money because of what they did in the past, not because of what they're going to do in the future. And so it's just part of being a GM in the NHL. And there's a lot of teams around the league who have contracts that they would like to get rid of.
We move on to question 4. And I think this will be the last time we talk about the Edmonton Oilers. I promise. We've spent a lot of time on them. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. There's a very good chance those two players will be up for the Hart Trophy by the end of the season. But it seems like every time they play the Montreal Canadiens, they're not necessarily looking like the best players in the world. I ask you, panelists, how have the Canadiens limited two of the best players in the world to, and I'm reading off these stats here, and I still can't believe it, 0 goals, 4 assists, and a -10 differential in 5 games played against the Montreal Canadiens? How does that happen?
It must really bother them, especially those two players when coming in against Montreal, and then every single time they can't really seem to redeem themselves. I think the Canadiens just feel like they figured out how to shut them down, working as a team. I know Thomas Tatar has often said, it's a sense of pride for them to be able to keep those two key players out of the game, taking away some time and space, focusing on them, but also not too much, working on their game. And I think for Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl that they're getting frustrated. And I think that is also getting the best of them. And they just can't really seem to get their way out of it. But the Canadiens have really been able to master the plan against playing those two guys.
I mean, if you look at, the way they play, obviously with their point production, but they bring something each and every night, and just very, very deadly players offensively. But I think from my experience, having to play against Gretzky or Mario Lemieux, I think you make a mental note going into it saying, listen, as a defenseman, you're the guy that's right next to the goaltender on this one, and you got to do everything in your power to make life miserable for those guys when they're on the ice and get a save here and there, because those guys do find ways to get good scoring chances. And, the goalie has to be at his best. But I think the main point being is the defensive group that's out there, pull back a little bit and think defense first and try and position themselves, always on the defensive side, and make it real tough, obviously, for them to have the time and the space, as they say, to do what they want to do, because they'll eat you up. So, you have to compliment the group that's on the ice and said, hey, listen, I'm not going to be jumping into the rush and get caught out of position when those guys are on the ice, because they're going to come back and bite us. So let's just take care of defense first. And if it's a boring defensive game when you're on the ice, so be it. You got to shut those guys down, because they obviously carry a huge, huge part of the offense. And if you can do that, you have a chance to win. And I think it's quite obvious that that's the keys to the success of, shutting down those offensive powers.
Well, if you want to look at how frustrated Connor McDavid is with the Canadiens, just look at that elbow that he threw at Jesperi Kotkaniemi. That was very un-Connor McDavid-like, but he's frustrated. And, a lot of Canadiens fans like to dump on Phillip Danault. Phillip Danault is a big reason why Connor McDavid has done nothing against the Canadiens. You might not notice it as much watching a game on TV. But one of the things watching games live when Danault plays against McDavid, and it's very rare during a regular season when they only play each other twice, but he's all over him. And he's just a pain in the butt. And Phillip Danault's such a smart hockey player, and he's really come into his game the last few games. He definitely had a tough start to the season, but he's just so smart and so good defensively. And he knows how to get under a guy's skin without being dirty. Like, he's not like a Bobby Clark type guy who would stick you or do this. He's always there. It's like, it's like a mosquito, like, buzz off, get away from me. And he does such a fantastic job. But, as Rick said, it's a team effort too. And when you watch the Canadiens this season playing against the Oilers with McDavid and Draisaitl, the defense are so good at just keeping them to the outside. Shea Weber's not the fastest guy anymore, but he did an outstanding job. These guys, he just pushes them, make them go to the outside, make them go to the outside, make them go to the outside. And it's one of the lessons that defensemen learn early in their life. I remember as a kid, I went to Howie Meeker Hockey School, and Bob Armstrong, I was a defenseman, or Bruins defenseman, and he drilled into us as kids, make them go to the outside, make them go to the outside. And that's what the Canadiens have been able to do with McDavid and Draisaitl. It's easier said than done, because other teams haven't been able to do that. But the Canadiens have. I think it speaks a lot about the experience they have on defense. And again, Phillip Danault and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, he obviously has been able to get under McDavid's skin also. So it really is, it's one of the most remarkable stats, I think, in the NHL this season, is how the Canadiens have been able to shut down the top two scorers in the NHL.
And Phillip Danault reminds me a lot of Thomas Plekanec and the job that he used to do against Sidney Crosby, that he was able to shut him down and get under Crosby's skin all the time. And it's a very similar style that they have.
And I'm really happy to not have to hear voices from the bench when those two guys are on the ice, coming up the ice, and have somebody say, hold the blue line, stand up. But, it's just no possible way that you can hold the blue line or stand up with those guys unless you want to get turned inside out like a pretzel. So, compliment to the guys on how they handle those guys with their speed. And, like Stu said, you try and keep them to the outside, put them in the areas where they're the least dangerous, which is the outside and the angles, and hope for the best that they don't embarrass you, because they're able to do that.
For the youngins who watch our show and who have no clue who Howie Meeker is, go to Google. Leave that to Google. I don't know if we have enough time for Stu to go in on his days at the Howard Meeker Hockey School. Let's move on to the final question here. Jeff Petry. Let's talk about this guy for a second. This guy, at one point, we were looking at him as a dark horse for the Norris Trophy. It still could be the case, but we can't help but look at his -5 against the Ottawa Senators over the weekend. Yeesh. What's going on with Jeff Petry? Is that a game to be concerned about going forward? How have you felt about his game the last few nights?
Rick, you want to talk about plus minus?
Yeah, not directing that to me. I would say, if on a given night, if I was only -5, I'm having a great night. Sometimes it's just like, you can't get into a situation where you point the finger. Sometimes it's just wrong place, wrong time. It happens. It's not fun, obviously, when that starts to play on your mind, that every time you get on the ice, you're getting scored against, even though you thought that you had your guy and you're doing the job that you're supposed to do. But sometimes that stat can be a little bit blown out of proportion. And like I said, I always relate and feel that it was blown out of proportion when I was minus 41. I thought it was closer to minus 39.
I have to say, Rick, I think you would probably love to play in this era where a lot of people are now kind of downplaying the plus minus statistic. I imagine you would probably enjoy being in this era a little bit more.
Well, I think anybody that watches the game and you see guys that are on the ice that basically they're getting scored against, but they had nothing to do with it. They're just there. You can jump over the bench and there go, oh, they get scored on and start rolling their eyes and start yelling at the guy that changed because, he changed at the wrong time and I get a minus. So, I think sometimes it can be a little bit over exaggerated, but if there's trends each and every game that you're getting more and more, especially as a defenseman, more and more minuses and goals against, well, it's defense first, and you have to patch up that area so that you're reliable. And when you get on the ice as a defenseman, you don't want the opposition to score. And if the trend is such that you're on the ice consistently over a long stretch, you have a problem. But that particular game, for Petry was unfortunate, and I'm sure he's put that behind him because he's had more, plus games and minus games, and let's move on.
And if you look at that game against Ottawa, it wasn't just Jeff Petry. There was a lot of other players who were not having their best game, and it happens that you're not living up to your full potential there. But he's had such a great season so far that you're going to have some highs, you're going to have some lows, and you just can't have it be the constant. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be the constant with Jeff Petry.
Yeah, plus minus is one of those stats you take with a grain or even a full shaker of salt. But when you're -5 on one night, you've had a bad night. And Jeff Petry knew that. In his press conference afterwards, somebody asked him, is there something you can take away from this game and maybe help you moving forward? And he looked and went, nothing. He was angry. And the other person I thought about that night was Luke Richardson, because Jeff Petry's spoken a lot in the past about just the calm, how cool Luke Richardson is behind the bench, how he never yells at guys, how he, having been a defenseman in the NHL, he realizes that when a defenseman makes a mistake, and Rick will know that, you know it before anybody else. You don't need to have a coach screaming and yelling at you on the bench. So I'm sure Luke Richardson just told Jeff Petry, throw that game in the garbage, man. Forget about it. Bad night. Move on. And I think the fact Luke Richardson, I think I mentioned this before on this show, I think is a huge part of this Canadiens team and the reason their defense have been successful. And I wonder how the Ottawa Senators ever let him get away. I think this guy's a future head coach in the NHL. Calm, cool, collected. I think he's, when they hired Dominic Ducharme, Marc Bergevin talked about sort of the modern day type of coach, and Luke Richardson fills that category. And so when Jeff Petry had that bad night, I thought about Luke Richardson and the calming effect he would have had on Petry. And Petry bounced back the next game and played great. And in the past, Petry has had problems sometimes with his confidence. When he loses it, he lets it linger, and he didn't. And I think Luke Richardson gets a lot of credit for that.
That's interesting you say that about Luke Richardson, because I find there's been so many instances with the Montreal Canadiens on defensively where they haven't necessarily looked all that great. And I feel with all the coaching changes that have gone on this season, and a lot of people have even pointed saying, hey, well, why don't they do anything with Luke Richardson? And that's not necessarily something that's just been stuck to this year. I could think of other instances last year where people thought, hey, you know what, maybe Luke Richardson should probably bite the dust. So I'm really intrigued at that assessment.
Well, I'm pretty sure that before Marc Bergevin fired Coach Julian, he probably talked with some of the key players on the team and asked, what's going on? Has he lost the room? Whatever is happening. And I'm sure he probably talked about with Luke Richardson too. And the defensemen love Luke Richardson. I mean, they really appreciate this guy. And, look at the way Romanov has progressed this year. Just having a coach who's not in your ear yelling at you all the time when you're a rookie. So I think, he's come along well. Romanov's come along well. I think Luke Richardson is just a really respected guy, not only in the Canadiens locker room, but around the NHL.
Okay, interesting. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. If you have a question you'd like to see us tackle on the next episode, leave it in the comments section below and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out our full episode.